This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Hi, and welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. Today on the podcast, I'm going to be sharing a short bite from episode 156. And it's a very important episode, especially for those people, be it athletes, musicians, creatives, or those who present and give speeches. In any of these environments, well, anxiety can really take over. It can take over our body, our somatic nervous system, where the nerves deliver information from our sensors in our brain, and then they go out to carry out commands. And our muscles, well, they can be impacted, as can our fine motor skills. So when it comes down to precision, in a sporting context certainly, perhaps putting in golf, bowling in cricket, throwing a dart, striking a ball with a snooker cue, this episode is going to be hugely helpful for you, where my guest and an expert in the field of focal dystonia talks a little bit about the brain and how we have a habit of moving into survival mode when we perform. She also goes on to share some really helpful ideas so that you can free yourself up, feel more safe in yourself when you perform or compete. I'm intrigued. You talk there about children and they go into the hypo state. So let's think about the practical tools that are there to help them. So supposing there's a gymnast approaches you who's a youngster and they lose their skills and they do get into this hypo state. How do you go about supporting them?
So the main tool that I use is a tool called Brainspotting. Okay, Brainspotting was developed by a New York psychologist called David Grand, who I will be eternally grateful to for discovering. I think is probably the best way, because this is natural. This is something that our brain is naturally doing all of the time. So he's discovered it and he's refined it so that we can use it very precisely. So anybody can try this out. Okay. If you think of a memory, or you think of, if you're a sports person, you think of a particular movement, you will find that your eyes have gone somewhere. They've shifted position in order to recall that information. So what that means is the optic nerve, where the optic nerve connects into the deep brain, it actually scans the brain. It has this ability to scan the brain to decide where to store the experiences that we've had today. This is normally happening in the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep, but it also is a retrieval mechanism. So if we want to remember something, our eyes go to the place that our optic nerve is stimulating that part of the brain to retrieve that information.
Okay. Would that very much be like, I suppose, going to retrieve it in a hard drive of a computer, essentially?
Yeah, we could relate it to it in that way. So what does that mean? That means if I can go back to what got stuck in the past, I'm talking as you're getting the idea, there's actually a lot of complexity with this about how, what we're looking for and how we're working with the brain spotting. But on the most simple terms, if I can go back to the past, where, for instance, my baby brain began to install that I have to try hard and harder and harder and harder in order to be okay, but I can connect with that with my whole adult brain, I can start to realize that that's not true. And I can actually rewire. The brain is highly plastic. So I can actually rewire that part of the brain to start to have different responses.
Okay, so this is where obviously the brain spotting comes into place.
Yeah.
So using the computer hard drive, are you essentially wiping the hard drive and getting rid of I memories, or I
wouldn't say we're getting rid of them, because I don't think we can get rid of the past memories, but we're rewiring them so that we keep all the strengths of them, right? Try hard has lots of strengths with it. Yeah. I know that the discipline that I've had in my life and the constancy that I've had in my life has been one of my greatest assets. I've achieved a lot and many things that I'm delighted with because of that degree of discipline and because of that degree of constancy that I've had, right? So we want to keep all of that because that's really valuable.
Yeah.
what we want to release is the compression that's around it, the fear, the survival issue around it, that if I don't, I won't get anywhere. I've got, that kind of like impulsive, compulsive, compressed feelings around it. Because let's remember, if we're in survival, if our brain is in survival mode, our nervous system is in survival mode, our large muscle groups are primed. So we don't have fluidity of muscle movement. Now that's going to affect our performance, but it also opens us to injury. But more importantly, or as importantly, when we're in survival mode, we don't need fine motor skills. If you need to fight your way out of something or run away, your fine motor skills are of no use. So your brain wants to direct all the energy into the large muscle groups. If you go into freeze, likewise, why would you want fine motor skills? You want the large muscle groups to become frozen and still. So the brain literally inhibits fine motor skills when your nervous system is in survival mode.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what we want to be able to do is we want to keep all the value of those earlier experiences, but we want to bring the nervous system into safety so that I can engage with my sports, with my practice, with my life from a place of safety where those then become kind of skills and abilities that I've got, but my mind and my body is free to move with them with fluidity.
Okay, so for an athlete who didn't necessarily invest in like working with someone like yourself in Brainspotting, and they were looking for simple, sort of practical, everyday strategies to try and help themselves with some of these physical ailments, are we talking about understanding and using the breath better and likes of yoga practice, that sort of thing?
Yoga practice and meditation are wonderful. Then it's about coming back into the center would be my advice. So there are 3 key practices that I give people to do, and anybody can do this on their own. I even have YouTube videos if anybody wants to go in and take a look at them where I guide people through them. One of them is something that I call the attunement repair exercise. That's the ability to come back to your body and develop your interoceptive sensitivity or perception of what's happening in your body. So one of the things that happens when we're in survival mode is we dissociate, we disconnect from the physical body. We override the information that it's telling us. So what we want to be able to do is come back into that information, because if I am able to recall at any time the exact movement that is required, not think it through, but my body has that recall of exactly how it feels when it's making that movement, then I can make that completely repeatable. So that's really important as a different way of training our body into the movements that it needs to make for a level of precision that we require. Then the second exercise is something that I call the zero state exercise. And that's literally being able to feel the pelvic bowl, being able to feel the hips, the bones that form the pelvic bowl. And they're kind of like, you can start to feel them like the wall of a bowl. And then the brain naturally, so you literally just feel into it. Spend a few moments feeling into that. And then naturally the brain infills the inside of it. And what you're doing is you're connecting to the center of gravity of your body. It's remarkable. When we connect into the center of gravity of the body, all our muscles become really engaged but really relaxed at the same time.
Okay.
And the mind becomes completely clear and relaxed too. So it's a really fast way of accessing safe mode in the nervous system.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna try that. Yeah. I know I've read a lot about John Kabat-Zinn's work and body scans and actively practiced for a while. So yeah, I'm going to try that. Yeah. And certainly check out some of your YouTube videos, which I would most definitely recommend the listeners to do as well.
Mm-hmm. And then the last exercise is called the kindness state exercise, and we can do it either directly through the body or through a memory of when we're being kind to somebody else, and you come to that feeling of warmth and softness in the center of the chest that happens with that kindness. Now, what's interesting about kindness, when we feel that in our body, that heals the center of the brain, the centers in the brain that have become depleted as a result of those early experiences.
Okay, so is there links there with compassionate focus therapy?
There are. I think the particular, it's a subtlety that I put, and I'm not going to say it's different because I know that this is in many other approaches as well. But the important part is feeling it in your body, not in your mind.
Okay.
It's the felt sense in your body and the direct experience of that's important. That's where the healing comes from. And what's interesting is out of that, I noticed there's a whole different coordination into the arms and the hands. if we're looking just at a physiological level. So those 3 core exercises are really remarkable, and they're really important in terms of bringing the nervous system back into safety. And from there, you can begin to understand how often you're in survival mode without even realizing it. When you feel competitive, you're in survival mode. When you feel like you've got to win, you're in survival mode. When you feel like pushing through, you're in survival mode. And so you start to be able to actually notice the difference, and above all, notice the difference in your body, how the body feels tight and constricted, and the mind feels tight and constricted in those other forms of being.
It's fascinating. This all of the things you've mentioned there as well are messages people hear in certainly in sport every day. Try harder, do your best, give maximum effort, all of those things. I'd like to reiterate what Ruth said. There's some hugely helpful information in this episode. And for more on this, I'm going to point you again to episode 156, where Ruth goes on to talk in more detail about focal dystonia. Our brains and our nervous system, well, yes, they are complex, as you'll gather. When we think about the somatic nervous system, well, it involves things that you can consciously sense. So think about your sensory system: sound, smell, taste, and touch. The somatic nervous system, well, it has 2 main jobs. All of our senses, they travel through our somatic nervous system to reach our brain. Sight is the exception. However, the other senses, sound, smell, taste, and touch, all use our somatic nervous system to reach our brain. Our sense of touch, below our neck, it uses the somatic nervous system to reach our spinal cord, which then goes on to relay signals to our brain. The other main job of the somatic nervous system links to our movement, our body's muscles, which rely on the signals that are given to them to help us move around. So the signals from the brain must pass through our somatic nervous system to reach those muscles and then to make them move. So any hint of anxiety, well, that can play havoc with our timing. And this is why I'm such a big advocate of some of the practices that Ruth has mentioned in this episode. In the show notes, you're going to find some links to her YouTube channel, where she explains more on focal dystonia, as well as some attunement repair exercises which she talked about. Some people may be listening to this podcast on the verge of quitting or giving up their sport or pastime. And if that is you, well, you will be feeling quite desperate at this stage. However, there is hope, and I'm hoping this podcast does give you some hope. I'd certainly advise you to look into this that little bit more. It's going to be able to help you learn some new things that potentially can help you free yourself up, help you enjoy whatever it is that you do. And in terms of learnings, you'll get more learnings if you sign up to the Mental Edge newsletter, which I send out on a regular basis. It includes helpful exercises, tips, and advice, and links to other experts too, much like Ruth. Have a great week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.